Hi, everybody, and welcome. My name is Melanie Dizon. I'm the Director of Education at the Davis Phinney Foundation, and I am here with our YOPD Council. Welcome, everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi.
I'm so glad that we're here. This is my favorite little cohort of people, and we today are going to be talking about work. There's an echo, and I apologize for that.
It's me.
So maybe if you're not speaking, speak yourself, so that people don't have to listen to my echo. We are going to be talking about work, lots of different things revolving around work, whether you are going to keep working, if you keep working, you retire early, take a part-time job, spend your time volunteering, and then all of the things that go along with that, and maybe having a young family and figuring out how your work life has going to change now that you've been diagnosed or diagnosed younger than you had planned for in your life. So today we have Kevin is with us, Amy, Kat, Gaynor, Tom, and Aaron are all here. They're all going to talk to you about their experience with work. So I don't want to intro them right now. I'll let them do that themselves. And we're also waiting on Steve, who I'm quite certain is going to be here, and also Heather is going to be here. So Amy and Kevin are sort of taking the lead for this conversation today. So I'm going to let them take it over, and we'll get into all the good stuff and start answering questions that you guys have.
Thanks, Mel. Kevin and I spoke yesterday about how we wanted to lead this, and we decided that really everybody learns from each other's experiences and the experiences of the audience too. So we're just going to go around and everybody's going to talk about their work experience both before and after diagnosis. I know that there are a lot of questions that come up when you get diagnosed young onset, and some of those questions are really concrete and reality based, like how am I going to continue to support my family? How am I going to continue to get healthcare coverage when I need it most? And those questions are not just for us, they're for our caregivers as well. And then some other questions are a little bit more, I think, a little bit more personal and philosophical things like, you know, what does it feel like to be forced into this sort of sudden U-turn while everybody else keeps going straight, sort of motoring, and what that means about loss of identity and loss of individual power. So there's lots of questions. I'll tell you my story. My story's not that interesting. It's very, very simple. I was diagnosed 5 years ago in my 40s, and I was working full time as a legal writing professor at a law school, and I also had a couple of side hustles going on. The biggest question that everyone wants to know is, should I disclose at work? And I think that that's a really big question. It's a very important question, and it varies so much from person to person and from job to job. I happen to be lucky to be in academia because I think that academia is a little bit friendlier to people with disability and chronic health conditions in the workplace. And I disclosed to my boss 2 days after I was diagnosed, and fast forward 5 years later, I'm still working full time as a legal writing professor. I still have a couple of side hustles and even more. And it's not easy working with Parkinson's full time. And but for most of us, or many of us, it's necessary. And so we do what we can to sort of, you know, hack through this new jungle of ours and make the path that we can follow. So that's my story. I know Kevin's is a little bit more complicated. We're moving to the private sector now, which is a little different.
It's not more complicated. I mean, yours is really exciting, and I've learned so much when I talk to you about what you've done. So, you know, I'm a pretty simplistic guy in the sense that all I know is healthcare. I've been a biopharmaceutical executive pretty much all 30 years of my working career. But within that, I've taken different facets of it. At the time of my diagnosis, I had actually transitioned to the service side of what, you know, the biopharma industry was, and I became a headhunter for a major executive recruiting firm. And so I was dealing with CEOs and boards of major pharmaceutical companies and venture capitalists looking to place you know, their senior leadership. A very highly stressful job. And once you're in the service industry, it's very different on disclosures. In my case, I didn't dare say anything because I thought I'd be put to pasture as soon as I mentioned it. anyway, I think and we'll talk more about this in the course of the conversation. There's Steve.
Hi.
In the course of the conversation today, but I think that everyone will have their own working journey and reasons for why they work, right? It could be financial, and it could be just for self-worth is why you're doing it. You know, as my neurologist says, she goes, you Parkinson's people are all very similar in the sense that she says, you're all type A people, even at rest. You pretend to be type B, but even in rest, it's like, I gotta go run here, or I gotta do this, or I gotta go to the museum, or I gotta, she goes, it's hard for you all to just slow down and smell the roses. And I would say that in my working career, that's very true. I think even if I didn't have to work, I'd figure out something to work on there. But I ended up taking a pivot in my career and actually finding a way to leverage my Parkinson's by becoming a professional patient advocate, and that's what I do now. And we can talk more about that path later, but I think we should go around and hear the stories of everybody else in the room. Maybe Tom?
Okay, had to unmute myself there. Thanks, Kevin. My name is Tom Polizzi, and I was diagnosed 12 years ago. At the age of 48 years old, I was an executive with a computer software company that I was also one of the founders. And for me, I told everybody, not everybody, I told the important people right away, of course, family, but I also told my business partners right away about my Parkinson's situation, because I had a fiduciary and a legal responsibility to keep them appraised of what was going on. And I didn't want them to see me deteriorate and not know why. It helped a lot. And then that extended on to the rest of my employees and whatnot, customers and that. So I'm kind of a proponent for that. But again, I think situations are always different. I worked for about another 8 years until I was 56 years old. And then I retired about 3.5 years ago. And, I think there's a lot of things that people that are diagnosed with young onset or diagnosed at a young onset age can do to plan for their futures and be prepared to deal with it. And that's what hopefully we can help you learn today. So. Who's up next?
Sorry, trouble unmuting. I think I'm the only Brit on the panel. I was running I'm a trained journalist, and I was running a PR and marketing business just outside London. And I was diagnosed nearly 8 years ago at the age of 42. And what I do now, well, basically, as soon as I got diagnosed, I think about 3 months later in the company Christmas newsletter, I got diagnosed in the October. And in the company Christmas newsletter, I came out about it. And the reaction from my client base was very mixed. So all allegedly coming from the right place, but a very different right place. So some of them, let's not bother Gaynor, she's not very well. Yeah, that doesn't really help you pay the mortgage though, does it? Or pay the rent, not being bothered with what you do for a living, what you have done for a living for 20 odd years. And then I kind of came to the conclusion that stress was such a major factor with this. To dial it down, I relocated, I became just a one-woman consultancy, walked the dog on the beach, best decision I could have made. And now I run a charity, which I believe is the only dedicated charity for young onset globally, although there's absolutely room for others. And that's what I do. So I use my PR and marketing know-how to promote us, I suppose, and that we need so much more. We need attention, and we need people to understand this is a different deal. Will that do?
That's great, Gaynor.
Okay.
Kat? Oh no.
Yeah, that's the problem. Let me exit out of here.
Sorry, guys. As Kat's trying to figure that out, if you are,
Sorry.
let's just mute
There's that better.
that fixed. While Kat's trying to figure that out, if you have questions as people are talking, remember that you have a little icon at the bottom of your dashboard that says chat. All you have to do is click that, and you can type your question into the chat box. What's the name of the charity? It's Spotlight YOPD. And if you write, yeah, oh yeah, there we go. She's got it right on her shirt. Super cool. Yeah, great. Okay, Kat, do you want to try it? And we'll just try it one more time. No, she's frozen. Okay, sorry, darn, Kat, we're gonna figure it out. Erin, can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Sure. So I was diagnosed 2 years ago at the age of 42, initially thinking I just had pulled a muscle in my right arm. So a bit of a surprise for me. At the time when I was diagnosed, I was a vice president of a global sales division selling both Oracle and SAP software into the user experience community, if you will. I did disclose right away to my manager what was going on because he knew I was having some challenges beforehand. And the reaction that I got was business as usual, which didn't necessarily work for me as I was trying to figure out my new life with medication, just processing everything and traveling across the globe into different time zones and trying to set a schedule just didn't work. So I went out after that into the system integrator community, and I still do sales, but I only do it domestically. And thankfully or non-thankfully, this year of COVID has actually helped me out a little bit and stabilized my personal life with the reductions that we've had on travel. So my new job and my new role, everybody knows what's going on and they're all extremely supportive, and they're supportive of the organization as well.
Thank you, Erin.
Of course.
Steve, you're muted. Sorry, I muted you. If you can unmute, or I'll ask you to unmute. There we go.
Hi, everybody. My name is Steve Hovey, and I was diagnosed 13 years ago in 2007. And at the time that I was diagnosed, I owned a couple businesses, one all related to the office furniture industry, and one was online, and the other one was more of a bricks and mortar. So I let my staff know right away. I just thought that it was fair that they knew, and the reaction was mixed. I had some people who were very concerned, and other people just, you know, it was like, oh, it's going to be okay. You know, don't worry about it. You're doing great. You're doing great. But everybody was very supportive. As time went on, when I could see that the Parkinson's was starting to affect me in different ways, one was my ability to handle stress became a lot less. I started becoming much more tired. You know, I used to love working hard, working, you know, 60 hours a day, not a day, a week. And I just couldn't do that anymore. And so when I kind of came to the determination that I couldn't be as effective as of an owner and a leader of the company as they deserved. And I was very fortunate that I found the gentleman who was looking to get into the marketplace that we were in. It was just a blessing. It worked really super well. And the company's doing great, which makes me very happy. Everybody's still there. So I was out. I sold in 2011. I did consulting with them for a couple of years. And then about 5 years ago, we moved up to Saratoga Springs, New York. That was an interesting transition because I went from owning a business, running a business. I even was running the business after I sold it. I was the divisional president. Being on boards, I was on boards of a college, various committees. I volunteered at a community center, and that all went away. So the interesting part was now readjusting my life in this, moving to this town where I didn't know anybody, which thankfully I found things that I really enjoyed doing. Most of it volunteer. As a matter of fact, all of it volunteer. So that's kind of that's my work journey.
Great. Thank you. Heather, welcome. We're glad you made it. Can you, you're muted still. We're just kind of going around and people are just kind of sharing a little bit about their work journey and sort of what happened once they were diagnosed.
I was just going to tell you that I'm the perfect example of why many employers are afraid to hire people with chronic illness and disability. Here I am late, couldn't button my shirt, was panicked and shaking, and no one in a meeting like this wants to hear that. So anyway, carry on.
You want to tell us about what happened, like when you were diagnosed? Did you just say, I'm going to do my own thing, or, what was that sort of decision process like?
I happen to be a creative, and I come from a place of never having study work after having kids. So my work was already disjointed. My resume already looked a bit like Swiss cheese. There are many people in their years that are, when you hit about 40 or 50, you go through these sort of changes where you look for more purpose and meaning. At least that's the experience of many of my friends. And so you may even be changing and transitioning already. So then the disease hits and you realize my capabilities just shifted. Some capabilities become better. I think that I've been writing better than I did prior to diagnosis. And then some capabilities you lose, as in timing. And my apologies for that. So yeah, it's been a big transition. I've taken more contract work from home. I'm home a lot now alone, writing and editing and looking for research and content, and I vet sources for a living, which is a lot of online research, perfect for someone like me. But you really have to look. It's hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Kat, are you here by audio? No, darn it.
I think we lost her.
Okay. Okay. Amy or Kevin, I'm gonna let you take it from there. And you
So I see already that some of the questions that are coming in are a lot of the questions. One of my side hustles is that I became a career counselor because of this. And most of the questions that people have are right away, how does Social Security disability work? How does my employer's long-term disability work? And will I be able to survive on that? And I think that we're having an upcoming webinar specifically on insurance. Is that right, with Aaron? Yeah, I mean, what I know about those things, and what I'm sure everyone else has sort of also looked into that, is Social Security disability is not going to be the salary that you have now. So that is going to be a factor in the kind of conversations that you have about how you are able to manage. Depends on whether you have kids and all these other responsibilities. And of course, when it comes to employer-sponsored private long-term disability, of those programs that I do know of, most of them are good for a couple of years, and then they want you to interact with the Social Security disability program. But I'm no expert on that, and I'm not an employment lawyer, but I do also get a lot of people asking me about lawyers, how to hire one, when should I hire one, should I hire one at all, and what my rights are when I have a lawyer. I think that's also an interesting conversation. But when it comes to the disability and the employment disability, what has been your experience, everybody else? Kevin, have you looked into it?
I did look into it, and I did the numbers, and frankly, with 3 kids, one in boarding school, one in college and one in graduate school, the math didn't work. And so I realized that I had to find a job that I'd be good at, add value, and also at the same time provide more than what disability would have offered me. I also was a little turned off on disability because it's almost a disincentive to try to find work on the side, right? It's almost like you cannot do anything which results in an adjustment in your W-2, because they'll end up penalizing you for it, and you end up taking more grief. And so that just for me didn't work. And so for now, I've actually ruled out disability after doing the numbers for at least, a few more years. But who knows? I think you have to be prepared to trigger it if you need it, right? Because the last thing you want to do is get laid off, because then I don't think you qualify for disability once you've been terminated. But again, I need to talk to a lawyer for that, right? How about
I actually often don't recommend talking to a lawyer before talking to some other services that are nonprofit and free that are just as or even more helpful for several reasons, but we can talk about those later too. I know, Erin, you have had your experience with your company's, is it your company's long-term disability program?
I don't think that was me.
Okay.
I do know if you switch companies. So I had started a new position, so I checked into the insurance before I made the jump, and was advised if I went without insurance for 90 days, so I had to get bridge with marketplace insurance, then my Parkinson's would be viewed as a pre-existing condition, and I wouldn't be able to get insurance covered under insurance for the rest of my life. So I think that's something that people probably are not aware of, and good information to know. So I did bridge it for the 90 days before my new position kicked in the insurance and picked it up, and everything was good from there.
And just to know, we put together a handout that is going to go out after this webinar that has links to helpful resources for some of these more individualized and more complex questions about disability and things like that. So hopefully that'll help. It's just that kind of conversation is so custom to your own particular situation. It's really hard to talk about in a general way. But there are definitely, it's definitely a quilt, right? And you have to put all the patches together and hope that it covers your needs. But you need help usually, and because it's not simple, and the stakes of making a mistake, like Erin just talked about, can be very high. So you don't want to make a mistake. There's one really good sort of like Social Security Disability for Dummies kind of book that I actually linked in the guide. I read it and it's really helpful. And so that'll go out afterwards too.
Amy, I just wanted to add one more thing as well. So I've worked at, the bigger technology organizations, and when I was trying to figure things out for myself, I was a little taken aback and surprised at how many questions I asked our HR department that they did not know the answers to. So that was a little eye-opening for me. You expect HR to have answers for you when you ask them a question, and I had to pretty much become my own advocate to figure things out, because you would ask a question and it would turn into, let me follow up on that for you, and then you'd follow up and you'd get the, oh, I forgot, I was doing this, doing that. So that was a real eye-opener for me, especially when you start talking about Fortune 500 companies and they're not aware of what the policies, procedures, and government regulations are with disability specifically.
I think that when you talk about having these conversations, often if you think about being on the employer side, they will sometimes see that kind of conversation as you drawing a line in the sand, and then all of a sudden it becomes what you thought was going to be just an informational question. It becomes sort of an antagonistic relationship now, and because they get defensive, I mean, rightly so, and then all of a sudden the words that they can say to you become much more calibrated and careful. And that's why I say it's not always a good idea, I think, to hire a lawyer at the beginning. I think you want to avoid that line in the sand as much as possible until you actually definitely want it. Because the conversations, once it turns into like, I'm going to be asking for something legal, right? Once that conversation turns into that sort of binary role, it becomes a lot more difficult to get information and to move collaboratively toward what could be, I think, a joint solution towards things. So that's why I think having these kinds of conversations beforehand, practicing with some people is a really good idea. And that's why I think sharing
Yeah.
experiences are good too. Heather, you say you have a story?
You're muted, Heather.
Could I jump in just quickly while Heather's, oh no, she's there.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. All I was going to say is I've lost my train of thought because of the thing.
That never happens.
I know, exactly. And they love that, the employers, don't they? All I was going to say is that it's all very well that the employers want definitive, don't they? They want the answers. They want to know, right, you've got this. How long have you got it? When are you going to go downhill? When do I need to make you redundant, retire you, whatever? Well, one thing it ain't is definitive. So we've no idea ourselves, have we? And I think that's the tricky thing. We don't understand it at this point, at the early stage. Certainly they don't understand it, but they want the answers, and we don't have them. Nobody has them. Heather, sorry.
And it's so highly competitive out there. It's almost vicious. I have a story that I was given permission to share from a friend who is an incredibly brilliant man. I mean, this person can think circles around me, whether he's ill or not, which leads me to my next point. And this is a very important point for all Parkinson's patients to hear. We are so incredibly hard on ourselves. We feel like we have to be above and beyond and do more just to keep up, because our clock is ticking so quickly and we're watching our abilities or our capabilities change daily, hourly, and they fluctuate. And so we're really hard on ourselves about that. And employers will notice if we don't feel confident in a role. And I think my friend, who's entirely capable and definitely the smartest person in his entire company, had a job that required him to do some physical stuff. And because of that, his coworkers who were very competitive and wanted his job began to complain, started putting little bugs in the ear of the management and so on and so forth. And he felt very much persecuted in this situation. And I think when people start to feel persecuted and get insecure, as we all know, in any situation, all kinds of things can happen. He started to doubt himself, and eventually, this is a good ending, I promise. He gets ousted from his company, basically furloughed or let go under suspicious circumstances, then enter COVID. Now, though, he has this great package, which he negotiated because he is so wise and with the help of many resources here, and he's able to have great work again. And he can also do consulting now because he was so good and is so good in his field. And then he can hire people to do the physical part. So my point is, slow and steady wins the race. Be the turtle, not the hare in this case, and just stay with it. Never give up. That's what I really want to say about that.
Great. Tom, did you have something to add?
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of variables here when you're dealing with this situation, from whether the person even has disability insurance available to them as an employee of whatever company. So some people are fortunate and have that, some others don't. So there's a lot of different ways that you need to navigate it or plan to navigate that once you get diagnosed. But I think if you're diagnosed as a young onset Parkinson's candidate or person, you do have some time to figure this out. Not a whole lot of time, but you do have some time to figure it out. And you have time to get things, what I call get the house in order, and understand where you're at, where you're going, and figure out what your goals are. You know, so financial planners, attorneys, not necessarily for applying for Social Security or disability insurance, but attorneys for, you know, building a trust for your for your family and writing a correct will and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of things to do. I think one of the best suggestions I could give anybody is Phinney Foundation has a whole network of ambassadors. I think there's 50 or 60 of us now, and we're not all well versed in this topic, but we know who is. And if you talk to an ambassador and have some issues that you'd like to have covered, they can usually figure out or find out who it is on the team that might be able to help you. So I wanted to put in a plug for our ambassador program for sure.
Excellent. Thanks, Tom. Kat, can you, we can hear you now. We want to hear your story.
Can you hear me without feedback? Okay. Thanks for your patience. I'm a little like Heather. I'm like, oh my gosh, everything's going wrong. I have 4 devices, but I'm finally on. I'm going to give you my story in a nutshell. I had symptoms for a long time, like many of you did before you were diagnosed. I was the director of a busy inner city nurse midwifery clinic. We did 60 to 70 deliveries a month. And I was doing 24-hour call and seeing patients in clinic and running our program. And I just did not feel well. And I decided to leave that practice on short-term disability while I figured out what was going on, and then went on to take long-term disability and Social Security disability. And it took a lot of thinking, a lot of talking, a lot of running numbers, a lot of looking at my options. I could have stepped back and not been the director, but it would involve a lot of fine motor coordination, a lot of procedural things. I could have stepped back and taught. I was on the faculty of several nursing programs, but it took a lot of weighing, and I needed some time to figure out how to manage my symptoms when I wasn't triple and quadruple tasking. And for me, it was the right decision and the healthy decision to step back and stop working for pay and step into a voluntary role and take disability. I was the primary breadwinner of our house. We looked and have gotten very creative with finances, and we've looked at retirement differently. We kind of have plan A through plan E. Plan E is we take the trailer and we go 2 weeks at everybody's house during the year. But fortunately, I have a really strong partnership in my marriage, and we've never been very defined by our incomes, thank goodness, because we never got used to having money. And there's more to life than money. I feel the hardest part was on my ego, leaving that directorship. I had worked hard. I was at the top of my game. I was in my 40s. I had 3 kids in college when I left my job. But we're making it work, and we're getting creative. And I think if you feel better, if you're in a stressful or in a distressful position, it's important to look at it. Your health is worth it. And your ego can take a hit, and you can redefine yourself. I mean, here I am talking to all of you wonderful people on this incredible panel. And I feel honored to still be able to contribute to my community, even if our trailer be small and humble and our house be full of renters. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
That's great. And it's something I want to talk a little bit more about. So everybody here is kind of shared a story that is, they're in a relatively good place, right? And you've had options, and you were either able to retire or keep working. And that is fabulous. And I want to speak to those people that might not feel like they have the choices. And if there's somebody out there who's, you know, diagnosed young, we get it every day. They're scared. Yeah. They are terrified. They have young kids. They can't not work. That's not an option. And so what are some things that those of you who have stayed in work, whether you're getting paid or not, that have figured out what are strategies to make work possible, more possible, that you can take care of your health and work? Because not everybody has the choice to say that I'm going to retire early. So Kevin, I think you can definitely speak to that.
Yeah, I think that everyone has to be willing to pivot at that point, right? And you know, you could be leading a path that is very rosy, and all of a sudden the rug's pulled out from you. And so you may now no longer be on the fast track, or you may no longer be the superstar of what you used to be able to do. And you may have to adjust, because I think staying working in a stressful situation actually is more harmful to our health. It's probably the worst thing you can do. But by finding something where you can practice your passion, you know, and tie it into your work, be it nonprofit, be it, you know, if you don't need the money, or if you can reinvent yourself to find something, I think is a really critical piece to continue working. And then you have to figure out, well, how can I turn my weaknesses into strengths, right? So here I was, a Parkinson's patient, and I could see a changing landscape in my industry, where the patient voice now started to become more important. And so I asked my board and my CEO, you know, I said, my heart is now no longer in what my old job was. It's now in patient advocacy, right? And so there was an emerging trend that was happening in our industry at the time, which increased the importance of the patient voice. And so I tell everyone, I turned my hobby into a job, right? I mean, I would have listened to your stories in this group all day long, but now I get paid for it, right? I would encourage everyone to try to find that place where they could turn, you know, their issues into advantages. Now, I happen to work for a company that's developing a product for low blood pressure in Parkinson's. So it's directly tied. If I come in and talk to you and try to, you know, see if you know, you're a candidate for our trial, it goes hand in hand now with what, you know, what my personal interest is. I would be doing this anyway, right? So maybe I got a little bit lucky timing, but I think everyone, you know, if you're trying to really soul search, is find out what you're good at and then try to direct yourself in that way.
Kat, go ahead. You're muted still, sorry.
I'd like to share that in our group of young onset women, I'm on an international thread discussion, and there are several women that are single and working, and they're their own income. And so they've gotten creative, and some have disclosed and others have not disclosed to their bosses that they have Parkinson's, but they have been able to flex their schedule some, which I think can be helpful. Instead of working an 8.5 hour day with a half-hour lunch, some of them have been able to work 3 or 4 hours in the morning and take sort of an extended lunch time and then work further in the evening. That can be a creative way to break up your day, and possibly add exercise, which we all know is so important. I also think that there are a lot of resources out there for assistance with paying things like electric and getting some bills paid, even if it's in the short run, to buy folks some time to maybe do a pivot or a reevaluation or look for another job that may be a better fit. And I think in terms of folks raising young kids, getting creative with how you use your resources for helping others cover childcare. There are some great, in neighborhoods, access to networking and trade and free resources that people can tap into from home on their computers, that you can network with from home rather than making a jillion phone calls and going to a jillion places. So I also will say that even though I was lucky to be able to afford going on disability. We have really changed our lifestyle. We have one car. We walk a lot of places. And we rent out part of our home so that we can afford to stay in our home. And so I think looking creatively at what your resources really are, perhaps going to a smaller home, perhaps taking a step down in responsibility in your job may be an option in terms of changing stress levels. People say, oh, you're so lucky you can retire. I do feel blessed. I had the option to do some of those things, but it hasn't come without costs. Our kids will have more student loan debt than they would have otherwise. And they all work while they go to school. So while these are not hardships, we have gotten really creative. And we Airbnb'd our back house for a while because we weren't sure we were going to be able to pay the mortgage. So getting creative, looking at your resources in a broad sense, not just what you bring home from your job, may help you to leverage what you can do to move forward with your diagnosis. So
Great. Thank you, Kat. Steve, and then Heather. Steve, you're still muted.
There we go.
No, still muted. You're still muted, sorry.
Unmute. How about
There we
now?
go.
You got me?
Yep.
Good. Okay. You know, as an ambassador, we have the opportunity to talk to people that just, they go online, they read our profiles. There's something about our history resonates with them, and they call. I've had numerous conversations with folks from all around the country, as well as people in my community who are in that position where they're young, they're scared to death because they have Parkinson's. They don't know what the impact is going to be on their work. They have jobs that they obviously need, that they're deriving a good income from, and they don't know what to do. You know, fortunately for me and for some of the other folks, it's like, you know, we make some adjustments, but you know, we didn't have to have the income. We were able to volunteer our time. But I really feel for these folks, and just what I see as the most important thing is that you take care. You first and foremost, you have to take care of yourself, because if you know, when even early on, stress and fatigue play a huge part in early onset Parkinson's. And if you're fatigued and you're stressed, then you're not going to be good as an employee, and obviously it's going to have implications with how you are at home with your family. So that's number one. So you need to find a role, whether it's with your company or another company, that can back off some of those things if you can. A lot of people seem to be afraid to talk to their colleagues and their bosses. You know, again, maybe not all the time, because maybe there are some really mean bosses out there, but I think you find that they'd be much more compassionate than you think, and explaining the situation. And, you know, I love it here, but where can I fit in based on the new reality of, you know, I may not be as reliable. I can't guarantee them to be here at 8 o'clock in the morning, because but I'll work late. I may need to take a nap at lunchtime, but I'll make it up for it. So I strongly suggest you do that. I've made that suggestion to other people, and they've come back to me like, oh my gosh, like they listened to me, like it worked. So it can work. And then of course the fallback is what Kat just said. I mean, you know, there may be some adjustments that need to be made for your cost of living may need to be adjusted, but you know, it's a tough situation to be confronted with at an early age, but you know, you can work around it.
Thank you, Steve. Heather, and then Gaynor, I have a question to ask you, and then Kevin. Okay.
So I'm going to agree with Steve by saying that taking care of yourself is actually a gift to everyone around you. It's just like what's happening in the world right now. The sky is falling, everything's on fire here in California. And yet if you can maintain your composure, your grounding, your health to a certain level, you're actually raising the vibration for all. That includes family, not just coworkers. And to answer one of the questions we got from Gloria, I would highly recommend, I know it's backwards on your screen, but looking at this as an option for a resource, Disability Visibility by Alice Wong. She's the editor. Many stories in here that can be shared with coworkers, friends, etc. And some of them are so accessible and universal that nobody could miss the point of these. This is just great. And also, it's rather nice to work with people who have humility. We've all worked in situations where we're around a bunch of know-it-alls, you know, just ask them, they're the smartest person in every room and they can handle everything. Well, those of us with disabilities or with growing challenges or whatever you want to call it, with, you know, changing landscapes in our lives, we know about the spoon theory. We know our limitations very well. And we are better able to communicate that often enough to say, I'm not sure, I'll go get the answer. Or I'm not sure, I will see how that works out and I will let you know. So we're forced to be so honest. And if you lead with vulnerability, you'd think that you would be putting yourself in a bad position at work. No, Brene Brown says it best, and I'm not going to say it like she does. But if you lead with your vulnerability, people will trust you more. Because we're all vulnerable. Tomorrow's not promised to any of us, and we don't know our capabilities from one minute to the next. And so if you lead with this, then people will appreciate you more when they work with you because you're honest, you're authentic, you're being real. Who wouldn't want to work in that situation? I would certainly like that. So in essence, the impermanence is the impetus, you know, is the inspiration, and you can go forward with that. So those are just a few things. Brene Brown and then the Alice Wong work to answer both Alice and then also Chip, who asked something too about sort of how to talk to family.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we should definitely get into that real quickly. So one of the things that Steve mentioned is fatigue and not taking care of yourself, not getting enough sleep. I'd love to talk to Gaynor. What has been your issues with sleep? I know that that's a sort of been an issue since you were diagnosed and probably before that. So can you talk a little bit about how that has impacted your Parkinson's?
I think it was a long while before that, probably for 4 years in advance of being diagnosed. I was a terrible insomniac. But it's okay because you can catch up on your sleep at your desk, which always goes down really well. John Stanford actually tells a story of someone who nosedived into his keyboard on the Z key.
That's great.
Think about it. Which is just such a sweet story, but it is I think COVID hopefully might introduce to people the whole idea of a bit more flexible working and you know, just being a juggle stuff. But also, I mean, we're so hard on ourselves, the expectations that we have that we can still work in the same manner, we can still do half a dozen things at one time, multitasking. Yeah, what was that again? You know, it takes 15 minutes to put my left shoe on if I'm lucky. You know, you just can't operate at the same level, so you have to be kind to yourself and make allowances. But there's an awful lot of people. I had one guy that contacted me and he had kept it quiet from everyone for 10 years. I was the first he told his wife, but I was the first young onset Parky he had spoken to. And because he wanted to keep the job going, he didn't want anyone to know. But while you're doing that, you're doing a disservice perhaps to the Parkinson's community, because we kind of need to get it out there rather than hide it, make it a hidden condition. And also he was getting probably the wrong treatment or not necessarily asking the right questions.
That's a great point.
Thank you.
Kevin.
Yeah, just to dovetail to the stream of conversation here. You know, we actually have to take some ownership too. I agree with the comment that most most bosses and supervisors want to do well for you because they hired you or put you in a position of your responsibility to begin with. But what they don't possess is they don't have the intimate knowledge that we are learning every day about our disease. And so non-motor symptoms, I've always said it's the non-motor symptoms that are more problematic than the motor symptoms. People would let me work with rigidity, but they may not understand why I'm tired, or they may not understand why, I'm having trouble multitasking, right? Or remembering person, woman, man, camera, TV. Those are the kind of things that they may not get, right? And they don't realize that Parkinson's is so multidimensional. It affects every system in your body. And so how can they understand that unless you take the time to educate them? So we actually have to own that piece of educating others as we go forward, or find other sources to help them get educated about it.
Yeah, thank you. Amy, you had said something, I think it's a great point. You had said something about that fear, of losing that income. What did you do, or what do you continue to do?
I did what I put in the comment. I researched everything. I think that and Erin says this too a lot, knowledge is power. And you lose your power. You don't realize that that's what you lose in addition to everything else when you get diagnosed. And you lose your confidence. And I think, Mel, when you were talking about confidence, I think that's a really key thing, because confidence in the workplace is what employers are looking for, among other things. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden you become, the floor drops out from whatever level of confidence you had before. And I think that you can get it back. Based on a lot of what Heather was talking about too, is by being vulnerable, in the sense that I feel like I've gotten my confidence back. It took a year or two, but by showing, and I think all the ambassadors are ambassadors for this reason, right? Part of what we do is we're trying to normalize what it means to be a functioning person with a serious health condition, and we're all still kick-ass in whatever it is that we're doing, right? And I think that we want to normalize that. And so I've decided in my workplace that I want to show, I have students, right? So I want to show my students, look, yes, I have this particular condition, and yes, I am sort of, physically weak and in many places and at many times, but I'm here to show you that those of you, and there are a lot of other people who have all kinds of hidden illnesses, hidden and not hidden, right? Even from a young age, that you can become a highly functioning adult and do whatever you want to do in a kick-ass way while still being supposedly, the weak one. And I think that that's where you get your confidence back in, from being really vulnerable, and showing people that you don't have to be that superhero. You don't have to look like what a superhero looks like in order to be good at something. And we're all going to be good at something. I mean, it might not be the same job that you have now, but you're going to be good at something, and that's what you need to find. And you need to find that, it's not going to be an easy path or an easy decision tree because of the finances involved, but it's worth going through that inquiry. And it might take a year or two before you get to that sweet spot where you are doing what you're good at and you get your confidence back by being who you are. And that's where all of us, I think, are aspiring to.
And I just wanted to, sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
Go ahead, Erin.
Yeah, just piggybacking off of what Amy said, I think for me specifically, it was sitting down and redefining what success looked like. So, it's going to be defined differently for me now going forward based on this. And part of that is historically, when I'm hitting a deadline or things are coming up and I had deliverables due to me, I could take on that work and get it done myself and just get the output done. Whereas now I push back more and have someone else be accountable for their actual job. I know that sounds bad to say. And I had that fear in the back of my head when I initially did that, like, oh my God, I'm going to get fired, because people are so used to me picking up all of the fires and fixing them, that if I pushed back and made people have responsibility for what they're supposed to be doing, how is that going to be received? And you just have to do it. And it's working out well and exposing some areas that we can improve organizationally and things like that. And I didn't get fired. People moved on and actually are doing their jobs and doing what they're supposed to do. And the other thing is not feeling guilty when I do have to take a break, or I have to shut down an hour earlier than expected because I am tired, or I just need a mental break just to go read a book or do something else than focus on work. That was my biggest hurdle, I think, because I am so type A and super competitive that I had this tremendous guilt that I just carried, like I'm not doing my job to the way I normally did it, but it's a new normal and we have to figure it out. And still, you can still contribute and be a valuable member, but how you define that's going to look a little different.
Oh yeah, I agree. I agree, Erin. I wanted to go back real quick to something that Kevin said about taking responsibility. And I think that's real crucial when you are diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. You have to take the responsibility to understand how you're impacted and how you need to change or pivot to deal with those changes. Like I've seen a lot of questions that have popped up here. When do I know it's the right time to retire? What about driving? Those are the kinds of things you have to take the responsibility to investigate and understand. I know when I can't drive, and I know when I have to have my wife drive. I'm off. I can't drive. I better not be driving. There's legal ramifications. If I got in an accident, it puts me and my wife and my family all in jeopardy, and that type of thing. When do you retire? Well, you retire when the things all the points line up, or you basically have to retire at a point where you can no longer perform your duties and that type of thing. So I think again, I'm going to go back to pointing out this network of ambassadors that we have, and that if you have problems, you don't have to go through this alone. I think that this is one of the greatest things that's out there in terms of a resource that I've seen in my 12 years in this field of Parkinson's disease. And on my journey, I think it's important for people to take advantage of those resources that are available in the forms of myself and Kevin and the other folks that are on this call. By all means, our names and numbers, our names and contact information is available. Give me a call.
Thanks, Tom.
Yep.
I want to finish with this question because I have a feeling that a lot of people have a response to this. And I'm going to put it in the work context because I think this is a valuable, a likely conversation that you might have, is that you disclose and you tell your coworkers that you have Parkinson's, and they kind of bring out that sympathy face, that like, oh no, and I'm right. How do you handle that? How do you flip it to, first of all, educate them and kind of teach them how you want to be seen at work and anywhere else, but also at work?
Mel, if I could take that one real quick, I got a cute story. I decided that I would tell my staff when they sort of noticed something was going on. Well, I was diagnosed in May, and by June, we were all at a conference, and one of my staff members asked me, how come you seem all stiff in the morning? I said, oh, it's no big deal. I'm getting old. I was only 48 at the time. And the conversation kind of went on. Another guy started asking me why I limped. And so I said, all right, you guys all sit down here and I'll tell you what's going on. I told them what is happening and what had happened to me and where we were headed. From that point on, whenever I traveled with one of my employees, they would put my luggage up in the container for me. They would open the doors for me. They would drive the rental cars. I'm like, this ain't so bad.
Right. Extra special care. Does anybody else have a comment about that?
I do. I say when I get that sympathy face, I say to them, yeah, it's tough. I consider it a gift in many ways, and I'm happy to talk to you about that if you have any questions. And that usually shuts them up.
Great, Gainer.
They get confused with that, yeah.
It's interesting that that you get sympathy at the beginning, and then they get quite bored of it. So when you can actually do with the sympathy, not the sympathy, but the help, it tends to be lacking. They're over it by then. First couple of years, stay well, and then still got it.
Yeah. May I add? Are you done, Gaynor? May I also add? Are we still on?
Yes, we are.
Okay, thanks. May I also add that I think people have different responses to illness. And so keep in mind that they're bringing their stuff, and for lack of a better word, they're projecting it on to you with a template that they know. okay? So it's like the old saying goes, you're going to meet a lot of people, a small number of people will like you, a small number of people won't like you, and most of the people you meet won't really have an opinion or care. So don't put too much stock into the opinions or the projections of others, whether you are at work or not. So that's one thing. Yeah.
And I think Mel, we should probably talk about as well how many people instantly become doctors when you tell them, right? And they're like, "Oh, are you sure you have it? How do you know? Who did you talk to? Oh, you should go see this person." It's funny, you know. I'm like, oh, everybody's a doctor all of a sudden, you know.
Like, it's so cool. I hadn't thought about any of those things.
Yeah.
That was the most aggravating thing with me is everybody would come up to me with something that they found on the internet or they read somewhere, you know, ginger abstract or, you know, some root of something, you know, and oh man, that drove me crazy. And you know, I actually, you know, bought a couple things and they never really worked.
Well, this hour went by really fast. I'm thankful for all being here, right, Kevin? It's hard to believe it's over. Thank you all for listening. I will send out the recording as well. We will send out the document that Kevin and Amy put together. And we are going to be back in a month to talk about something else fabulous. If you have any questions, please make sure that you just email me at mdzon@dpf.org. And as Tom has said, happy birthday, Heather. And also happy birthday, Gaynor. They're like a couple days apart. Big birthdays. As
He's
Tom,
older.
Yeah, Heather's older. Let's just say it. Tom had mentioned about our ambassadors. And if you go to our website, click at the top, it says connect. And then you scroll down and it'll say connect with an ambassador, and you can find all of them on our site and our contact information. Kevin, you look like you're about to say something.
No, it's just, I so enjoyed this group and just the open conversation that we have. And our audience should know that none of this is scripted. It's all just honest feedback from how we are all feeling and experiencing.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. We will see you in a month.